Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Porter Anderson. I'm the editor-in-chief of Publishing Perspectives, the news medium of Frankfurter Buchmesse. And we're very glad to see all of you in what is a very important session in the Frankfurt Calling series, which I like very much. It's a wonderful addition to the fair where we're talking issues, as publishing must. What we have today, in a sense, is three issues in one. We call it the Trinity of freedoms that are under threat. And our title today, as I'm sure you know, is Democracy Depends on Reading. And the trinity of freedoms that we talk about as being threatened are the freedom of reading, the freedom of publishing, and the freedom of expression. I come from a country where, of course, everyone knows just how much attack our freedoms in this regard are under. We're getting a very alarming signal from PEN America, as a matter of fact, that its newest survey is showing more than 10,000 instances of attempted suppression of freedom in the year 2023. The American Library Association happily sees a slightly lesser jump, but it is jumping. It is still rising year after year as the far right works to try to attack literature, basically, and to try to suppress it. But these things, of course, go beyond even book bannings and even beyond the educational settings in which they seem to happen so often in our culture. And they certainly go beyond the United States. We are seeing examples right in the middle of Paris, for example, when a book is made to be wrappered and covered in a bookstore because it's about young people's sexuality. And it's a great book for young people, right, who need to read about this. And this is France. This is the Interior Ministry, moving against Thierry Monier's publishing house. This is going around everywhere. It's probably going to get worse before it gets better, it seems, because the wave is upon us. So this is an interesting and very useful and important session this afternoon, and I'm glad you're here with us. I'd like to introduce who is with me on the stage here, because we have a wonderful group to speak with. Anke Steinecke is the Global General Counsel and Chief Legal Officer of Penguin Random House. And Jean Poderos is the Director of Edition Court et Longue, an historian and an economist by training. We have Felicia Hofmann, who is a social media and marketing expert and lead at DTV, a very active company. And Dündar is here. It's exciting to have this young man because he is the youngest person to have been elected to the board of PEN International, which is a fantastic thing. Indeed. Congratulations. Yeah. No, it's great to see, as a matter of fact, even the diversity of age here, because I think one of the things that publishing is learning very fast is that it needs to make sure that it brings more youth into its own ranks and into its work so that we're actually starting to reflect the power of the youth that exists in our cultures right across the world. I wish it weren't a new thing to some of our publishers. It is to some. Some are right there already. But it's great that it's happening, right? When we have a problem of that kind internal to the industry, it's really good when we finally get hold of it and start working on it. What I'm going to ask our panelists here to do is to speak to us for a few minutes each about their particular take on what we're talking about, because it's an issue that has so many entry points. Kristen Einerson, our great chair of the Freedom to Publish Committee at IPA, which is, of course, working with Frankfurt to produce this afternoon. And in fact, our Prix-Voltaire director is here with us too. James Taylor on the front row here, and also the communications director for IPA. We have a lot of our great friends. There's Olivier from IPA who are with us. These people, I have more friends here than I even recognize. Everybody, I know them all. No, it's wonderful because what we're looking at now is a focus that Kristen and James and Olivier and everybody, Jose Borghino at the agency, have brought into focus so tightly and have been helping us this year to really, by going at the three trinities, as we're calling it, going at a deliverable message. something that's not quite as diffuse, because as I started by saying, there are so many different points of entry. So, Anke, if I may, I'd like to start with you, because of the enormity of the censorship wave that I'm talking about in the United States, of course, and that has a great deal to do with PRH. And we've seen some wonderful responses. I will tell you briefly before I hand over to Anke, Nihar Malavia, the CEO of Worldwide Penguin Random House, sits in New York, of course, with us. And during Banned Books Week, for the last 2 years, he has set around what he calls the Banned Wagon. And it's a big, you remember library mobiles? It's a big bookmobile that drives to the hot points in the United States where censorship is the worst and hands out free copies of the books that are being banned. It's a fantastic gesture. This is a publisher on the road. He's that activist about it, and Nihar is one of our heroes now. It's really great. So it's super to have you with us. And would you please speak to us about this?
Thank you so much for having me, Porter, and I really look forward to the conversation on this important and, as you say, really urgent topic. Censorship in the form of book banning is really a direct threat to democracy, and for Penguin Random House, as a publisher whose mission it is to create books for everyone and give diverse voices to the public, it is also important that mission is under threat if we don't fight it, right? So, and we don't see the role of the publisher as just putting the books out there, but making sure that readers have the possibility to encounter the books. So, as you already mentioned, in the United States, we're seeing an avalanche of book banning, and it has really dramatically increased over the last years. You mentioned that PEN America just came out with its most recent study of the 10,000 cases of book banning in the school year 23-24. That is 3 times the amount as the previous year, and about 1/3 of those books that are banned are by authors or have themes of LGBTQ+, and another 1/3 has characters or themes of race. So there is sort of like a subject matter and a viewpoint that is being directly attacked in the United States. So these bans, maybe just a little bit to the history of it, is they really, when we're talking about bans, it's really restricting access in schools and public libraries. And it started first in communities with conservative parent rights group, Moms of Liberty is probably the most prominent one, that was putting together lists of books that they found objectionable. That would be because they have any reference to sex, because there's anything about sexual identity, because they didn't like the viewpoint on race that books had. And then parents would be asked to challenge these books. They would be taken off of the classrooms, of the library shelves, and oftentimes not put back at all. And then a couple of years ago, this trend intensified, and some of the states, including some of the very big states in the United States of Florida, where you just traveled from, hurricane beaten,
Yes.
and Texas expressly enacted book banning laws that restrict the books in schools and libraries due to their content and subject matter. And these laws are usually drafted very broadly, referencing age appropriateness of books or sexual content, and often include penalties for the educators and the librarians if they don't comply with the laws. So really quite scary. And the books that are impacted, just to give you an idea of what we're talking about The Diary of Anne Frank, because there's a reference to a sexual fantasy. We're talking about Hemingway, because there are communists in one of the books. There's Toni Morrison, John Green, Jodi Picoult, the list goes on and on. So not extreme, not pornographic books of any stretch of the imagination. And the removal really disregards the educators and librarians, and directly questions and threatens them and threatens their livelihood, quite frankly. And it's important to recognize that these are the trained professionals that are in the schools and in the libraries to really make sure that the right books find the right readers. And it is also important to mention that it is not just the targeting of the specific books, but because these laws are so overbroad, educators often have no other choice than to just wholesale remove big bulks of books because they have no time or parameters on deciding what potentially falls under these laws, and they could lose their jobs. So you have had whole classroom libraries being removed in Texas. So it has a chilling effect beyond the 10,000 examples that you just mentioned that Penn found. So it's a bigger problem even than what we're talking about. And so what has Penguin Random House done? That's what I'm here to talk about. I just felt it was important to give a little bit of the background. So in the spring of 2023, when we really saw this dramatic increase and these laws being enacted, Neha Malavia, who is a big champion of the freedom to read and freedom to publish, decided that we needed to really focus on this. And he created an intellectual freedom task force within Penguin Random House comprised of senior leaders of legal, communications, marketing, sales, to really focus on how can we increase our activity, how can we organize ourselves to combat what is going on. And many of the things we've done, you mentioned the bandwagon, it's about increasing awareness, it's about education. And we created a lot of resources for students, for parents, for educators to help them fight book bans in their communities as they encounter them. The book wagon that went around, we're sending informational packages to not only educators but to bookstores, to influencers, to give them tools and help them educate and argue why books need to be in the classrooms. But then the thing that we did that was really quite different, and this is why you have a lawyer sitting here and not a publisher, is we decided that we really needed to take a strong and very visible stand against these unconstitutional laws. And so we decided to sue, and we have brought several lawsuits at this point against states. And that was not something that was a small decision. The last time that a publisher had sued a state over censorship was more than 60 years ago. So a long time ago. But our first lawsuit against the state was in Iowa, where the state of Iowa had enacted a quite egregious law that had these penalties that I was just referencing. And at the time, we were the only publisher that stood up and challenged the law. And I'm very happy to say that, that we have started a trend and that the other big publishers in the United States have now joined our fight. They have joined the lawsuit in Iowa. We have just brought, a little over a month ago, a very big lawsuit in the state of Florida challenging the law there, and we are about to actually joining together yet again to bring another lawsuit. So we are also wanting to set an example to other states that are thinking about enacting these laws, that we are not going away, that we're going to keep fighting this, and that this is an important fight for us, right? Because if you're thinking about it, if the government can dictate what books readers are allowed to encounter in libraries and classrooms, then we're going down a very dangerous path that really, as I said, I see as a direct threat to democracy.
This is very helpful, thank you. And we're all very, very admiring of what PRH is doing and leading the way. On the court circuit, I mean, it's turned out that in the United States, the courts are where we're having to fight this out. And I remember thinking a couple of years ago, as so much of this began, my God, it feels like this is a publishers association, which works closely with PRH, that's doing nothing but going to court. But that's what is necessary. In our particular situation, that's going to be continually necessary. But now we have, speaking as you're saying of people joining in, now we have the Authors Guild moving in with 11,000 members. They will join one of these suits as one of the plaintiffs. The other big five members will come in led by PRH. It's thanks to that initiative that we're now in the courts and winning cases. That's the good news.
Yeah, and I should mention that that even before we were fighting the lawsuit, we actually brought a lawsuit together with PEN America in Escambia County against one of those instances where the Moms for Liberty had taken the books out of the classroom. So we just actually had a nice victory there last week that books came back into the classroom. So that's the other very positive thing, that we're seeing the positive impact and we're actually seeing success in these lawsuits.
Yeah, and I do hope the intimidation factor is working that way, because of course what the far right wants is intimidation itself. Every time it pulls one of these in some school district, other states are watching, other districts are watching, teachers are watching, librarians are watching, and becoming more and more fearful. And part of the job of right-thinking Americans, meaning correct thinking, not to the right, is in fact to bolster and support and say to the people who are trying to hold the line, we're with you. We are supporting you. You don't have to be intimidated. It's not easy. And as I say, I think it will get worse before it gets better. But this is very helpful, Anke, to have your legal perception on this, because that is where it's gone. Yeah, wonderful. Thank you. We'll be talking together a bit at the end, and we'd like to hear from you, too, if you'll have something to say. So do stay with us. Jean, may I turn to you next, please? And you've... I like the fact that you've been talking to us as we've prepared our session about Me Too and transgender issues and the Israeli-Palestinian conflict and several good issues. Tell us where your thoughts are on this now.
Well, first I should say that I'm talking as I'm a publisher of children's books, but also on behalf of the Syndicat National de l'Édition, as I am part of the bureau of its youth commission.
Very good.
Western societies are reflecting on very powerful social debates, as you were saying, Me Too or transgender discrimination or the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. Of course, these debates are not equivalent, but what it is are the increasingly radicalized responses to them. Suddenly, we see that what is unacceptable to some are forbidden, is to be forbidden to all. This is the typical case of poor education, to me, in the way people interact on social media, for instance. I have a couple of examples. In a book published by a French publisher called Édition des éléphants, the portrait of a young boy was criticized because he had a long hair. And on the other hand of the political spectrum, I should say, in a book published by another French publisher, a double-page spread showing a guinea pig with big cheeks on one page and a boy with similar cheeks on the other page was criticized for discriminating overweight people. It's a bit far. I believe that I believe that publishers our role in the literature is to contribute to build ourselves, to create a critical mind, and to identify the roads open to us and how to choose the ones we want to take. Nevertheless, French law requires, since 1949, that all books aimed at readers under 18 years old be submitted to a content analysis commission. They must not contain any pornographic content, incite discrimination or hatred, advocate forbidden substances, violence or crime, or be likely to harm the physical, mental, or moral development of children and young people. This is large. In reality, the 30-member commission is unable to examine the entire production, more or less 8,000 books a year. And they focus more on novels for young people than on picture books. Recently, as you were mentioning it, a novel published by Thierry Magnier in a collection aimed at readers aged 15 and up was banned for minors on the grounds that it was pornographic. Thierry Magnier, the publisher, claims that the accusation ignores the fact that the series is aimed at an audience over the age of sexual consent in France, 15, and that the text has been taken out of context too. The law establishing this commission was passed in 1949. It's fair to say that society has evolved, and so must the law. Today, the enemy is not the Nazis anymore or the American comics. You know that French have a long history of a fear of the American soft power. And we tend to be more concerned by cases of deliberate violence or religious indoctrination, much more than pornography, actually. On the whole, this committee, we believe, is a good thing. France has also a long history of thinking that the state should take care of the good of the welfare of its people. However, we believe it should make up of more people with a good knowledge of what children's literature is, so that we have a better idea of what is acceptable from a literary point of view. And I would like to add that from a general point of view, in an ideal world, we should be thinking together, not admonishing each other.
That is a very important point. It is an interesting problem, and I see this all over the world in all the markets we cover, that something about contemporary discussion, something about contemporary debate means in people's minds that they must win in some way. You can't discuss a problem in which you see things two different ways for some reason without feeling you have to convince the other person. You have to change that person. I don't know where this came from, and I'm not sure how long ago it crept into so much of what we do. But I know in my culture a lot of this comes from sport, because it has attuned the culture to competition in so many things. And yet in other places where there is no such fascination, it's still there.
Well, it's no more debates, it's wars between people.
Exactly.
It's not a question of conviction, because when you try to convince someone, at least there is room for some debate.
Yeah, of course.
But if you don't think like I do, then you are a bad person.
Right.
In all the political spectrum, actually. And that's what is very, very worrying.
Right, and this is why in so many cultures the questions of compromise and facilitation in government are coming apart, because they don't feel that they can be seen by their constituents to be cooperating in any possible way with somebody on the other side. It's a very dangerous moment, and it is built into, and this is where we need to go with Felicia, built into the conversational exchanges we have. What you're seeing on social media probably shows you this 8 million times a day, right? Is this where you're seeing it all? Is just this tension?
It is. I see it. I see it every day. So, to my background, I work with social media for the DTV publisher,
Right.
and I do a lot of community management. And this is exactly where I get in touch with all these kind of different, different meanings and different expressions, which is a very good space, but also a very ambivalent place, so I'm going to start with my take on this whole topic. Democracy depends on reading, because it obviously does. My take is through social media, as I just said, and its dual role. Like, we have social media as this huge room of freedom of expression, and everything is so fast-paced, and news go through the world so fast, and you have access to news faster than ever before, and you're faster to create yourself, all of your opinions faster than ever before. But this comes also with a great danger, because we know all about fake news and what are the sources and everything. And I think of course, education in reading and such, but also education in social media and education in whatever you read online and how to recognize where things are coming from. So I think social media has a very, as I just said, ambivalent role. But for me, I have three main topics that I would like to talk about. So the first one is, as publishers, we have the responsibility to publish different books. It's as easy as that. If you put it plainly, we need to have different opinions and different points of views in different books, and everything needs to have their space and their promotion. And the other point, of course, is social media, as I just said, the platform to express. And the third part is to really promote the reading. I think this is what I am doing as my daily business, is promote reading, especially within the younger generations. Like it's a very, very nice anecdote on this point. I've been to Warsaw, and they told me that they have this big campaign where they are taking pictures of famous men and also, dads who are reading with their sons, to educate the children from a very early age that reading, the capability to read, is your ticket to a working and a healthy democracy. So I think that was really nice that we are not only talking to the girls, because this is what we see on social media. It's mostly girls, but we really want to talk to everyone, to every child, to every person out there. So I think the promotion of this freedom of expression is also very, very important. And I think my main topic is the social media and the dangers that come with it, because there's also the danger of hate speech. Like, where do you put this in a bigger picture? Because I think we all agree, hate speech is not supposed to have place or take space in this whole discussion. So I think for social media, it's really important to really zoom in and see where are my different where my information coming from. So so I think these are the main topics, is to where can I get my information that is, of course, you're always in your bubble. So you are in your bubble, and I think this is kind of a danger as well, because of course maybe you are in a good part of a bubble, but then it keeps going. You keep, with the algorithm, you keep getting your news, and you are still not in this discourse that you're supposed to be with any other. So I think to also leave your bubble and check in on other points of view is also very, very important, and I think this is what we do through reading. So then, of course, reading is the most important thing for democracy.
I think you're right on, and what I do want to thank you for too is your mention of boys and men reading. We find this is something we're becoming more and more aware of around the world, is that for a great deal of time there's been a lot of very fine work done for women in particular, and done for young girls who are working on their self-esteem and needed support and needed to understand that they have access to any career they want in the world. This hasn't yet been done for guys very much. And they are the ones who can be quite susceptible to the allure of the online world, to that knockabout feeling, say anything you want. They're being taught that by a person who's very orange, right? And by many of the acolytes of this kind of thing. And it's very, very damaging, and it's creating a horrible problem in terms of how we even approach some of this, because they're already very far down the road toward a kind of radicalization. I feel, I don't know if anybody else agrees with this, but and it's okay if you don't, we don't have to be upset about it, but I feel disappointed in a way that social media have become such a double-edged sword, because there's such potential there. The fact that you can say something to the entire planet that's tied in at the time, I mean, you have the potential access to such amazing range, and yet it's become so badly challenged and compromised.
Yes, I think you, as I just said, it is important to learn about this mechanisms of social media, that
It is.
you are in your bubble and you get your information, but there's a lot going on the other side of the veil, maybe, that you don't even see. And I think as I was talking to my grandparents once, they told me, oh yeah, they saw a video on YouTube, and but they weren't quite sure where it was coming from. So I was thinking about, we have age restrictions for younger people for the internet, so maybe we need, I know it's it's a dangerous take, but it goes through all the ages. It's not only for the children, it's also for us, and it's also for elder people to really focus on where do I get my information from, and in what bubbles am I. So I think, and also there was one small point that I forgot to say with social media. I think which is new about social media, or which I personally, as a social media worker, really appreciate, is that now big firms, big companies, are not that big anymore. I mean, of course, there are big companies still, but as we are on social media at DTV Verlag, you can text us through your phone, through social media, and we are there, and we have to answer. We have to take responsibility for what we do, because every normal person can ask us, and we are in a direct, like conversation with them. So I think this is kind of good as well, so that that big firms are not just like, oh yeah, they can do everything they want behind closed doors. So everything is out in the open now, very much faster out in the open.
Potential of transparency there.
Yeah.
You're right. I mean, this is an example of a good constructive capability that exists in these technologies. And yet they are beset by other things. It's like so many things. They're shaking out, and slowly. Thank you. Thank you very much, Felicia. Anke, we didn't get a chance to actually formally prepare what you might bring to us in terms of a top-of-mind point, a talking point. But being in the position you are, particularly with PEN International, I've just had a very nice interview recently with Jennifer Clement, and she's so articulate on all of these issues. What do you see we have an election coming up, as you know, in the States, that young people are going to factor enormously in, much bigger than before, because of the size of Gen Z now. What do you feel is the sensation, the sense from our younger generations of the dangers and how serious these are when we talk about the three freedoms?
I think for me, I come from Turkey, and Turkey is a place incredibly polarized. And for young people there, it was evident from a long time ago that we don't find spaces to talk to each other. Because we have been so polarized that if you go on a platform that publishes essays, it takes a side. If you go on newspapers, they take a side. And most of the media is owned by government cronies, you could say. So there is this shrinking space for free expression that I think we can combat by creating spaces for young people to talk to each other beyond ideologies. Because it seems like a no-brainer, but a lot of our issues are connected. I find, from climate change to pandemics, from wealth inequality to corruption, and we do, when we talk to each other, find some common sense about, yes, we do need spaces, yes, we do need not hate each other, but when it comes down to ideology, when it comes down to theory, we kind of end up in debates, as we were just saying. We end up in these groups of bubbles, and we reject the other side. That's where I think literature can really provide a solution, where storytelling in general can, because it does make us realize beyond ideology how we connect. And I think PEN, on focusing on those people who are, in a sense, town criers, people who sound alarms of what's going on around them, if we could just protect them, amplify their voice, and sort of build communities around them, I think they do talk common sense, they bring universal values to the table, and if we can unite around them, I do have a feeling that our differences matter, but not as urgently as a livable future. And I think young people sense this somehow, that we are screwed on our own and we need to get together to an extent. And to do this, I think we need some kind of preemptive policy rather than just reactive to when people get in trouble. What I mean by that is young people often lack support. They lack kind of a community around them that helps them unite and see opinions of different peers around the world. How do they experience life? What are their problems? And let alone the other sides of the world, in their own communities, people with differing views, they have no idea how they live. I mean, you know, I don't have many Erdogan supporter friends in Turkey, but we built a young writers community called İlkyaz, First Writing, and we said no essays, no politics, just poems and stories. And somehow nationalists wrote, Kurdish people wrote, and transsexual people wrote, and you know, we started getting a sense that okay, we share a lot of feelings, we share a lot of frustration as to how this country is going. And I think that is one way that we're trying to do with PEN now to create those spaces for young people. So we just set up a new Young Writers Committee, which is the first time in 35 years, I think, we had a new committee at PEN. And we had started a project called Tomorrow Club. And the main issue is that, well, I see three main points of why young people are so deeply divided. One of them is really isolation. We don't have these spaces to relate to others that may feel like us and find commonalities between us. So if we've had a space to share our experience, then maybe that can help us connect to people of other views. And if you were able to read that your peer in Togo or your peer in Philippines or your peer in any country in the world can share a similar story to you, then maybe you can find it within yourself to act collaboratively, to do some kind of a cross-border support. And if we can amplify these young people, then maybe they can get connected to these international networks already in place that can empower them, that can offer protection, that can offer a sense of confidence in doing what they want to do, and if they get in trouble, to help campaign on their behalf, to, you know, provide support. The other thing is division. Really, uprooted youths kind of feel unheard, and they need kind of to be inspired oftentimes. I found that community leaders really inspire me. People who are going against the odds to stand up for what they believe and speak the truth. And of course, it comes at a great personal cost. I cannot return to my country, and you know, just for speaking the truth, my family cannot return to the country. So of course it comes with a cost, but then you find a global family of people who have committed to the same universal values. And that really gives you a sense that, okay, I am not alone in this. And there are ways that people are combating this, whether this is by fiction, whether this is by developing an app that allows people to have conversations beyond ideological borders. So I think we need to amplify these voices even more, to give others who may feel lost, who may feel like, I want to do something, but I don't know what. Well, here's a bright young person who's telling you his experience. Here's what you can learn from them. And we hope to do this with Tomorrow Club, to create a kind of online platform, but also physical spaces where young people can meet beyond these ideological borders and geographical borders, and realize that we are in the same ship and we don't have much time to sort our problems. We can get back to our differences. They of course matter, but as I said, not as urgently as having a livable future.
I think this is very exciting. It's, it's wonderful to hear you talk with such assurance about understanding you do not have to go this way, and that there is a way to turn around. You, of course, come from a great family of freedom and independence and independent thinking and critical thinking, which is so important. I wonder, when you start messaging this out, do you find that it takes quickly among the people you want it to reach? Do they pick it up and understand it and feel that this is what they've been waiting for? Or do you have to do a lot of persuasive work in the process?
It changed based on generation. You could tell some of the older, more experienced colleagues, of course, come with some worry of the risks that this might bring. You know, if you make space for a young person, you might also open space for them to be hunted down for what they write. How are you going to protect them? There are risks there. So, of course, that is a concern. But when I talk to younger people, I think they often feel that, yes, we need this togetherness. Because everybody's trying to articulate this sense of let's do something together, but perhaps to me it ends up in frustration and anger oftentimes, because they don't have outlets for it. Right. You know, we were talking about radicalization of views and protest. Well, that's also because people are not given peaceful mechanisms that are supportive communities to, when they sound something, to hear back, feedback, to get support. So I do think that if we are able to create these safe spaces for people to peacefully express themselves, maybe they won't have to feel radicalized and express a bunch of anger. Because let's face it, we're not talking about truth anymore. We're trying to, when you tell someone the truth, they have their own truth. But if we are talking emotions, we're talking about, are you feeling frustrated? Me too. Are you feeling anger? Me too. Are you also kind of poor? Me too. I think young people really share that across borders now. Nobody has wealth, nobody has this hope of a better future, but they do have somehow hope in the youth. Whether you look at the right wing or the left wing, there's a, you know, the word youth just paints a whole diverse group in a single brush. But I think that's what we need now, to get closer together in a way. That, of course, if you have hopes and I do, we might be different, but let's talk about our common problems and common shared values that can move us towards them. It might sound a bit idealistic, maybe you are a bit when you're young, but I do think that we can inspire each other. Whenever I meet with a brother or sister from a totally different country, and to hear the core message being similar, that we need to get together, not magnify how different we are, I think that is the message, because we've done that a lot. Actually, Alan Moore says something I really like. He quotes the alchemists, and he says that alchemists had this formula of solve and coagula, which is just basically putting things together and pulling things apart. And he says the whole history of art could be viewed as such, that we go from pulling things apart and then putting back together. And he says that we've done so much pulling apart now, created so many categories for how different we are. I am this identity, you are that identity, and this is how different I am. But perhaps it's a time for some solve now, coagula, which is that put it back together to form some meaning about how we stand together. We can go back to solve later, but I do think that we need to coagulate now.
I think you're saying this very well. You're very articulate with it. And one of the fundamental things that you're getting at comes from the dark side of the web, where always they use emotional response. They look for anger in order to get people riled up, and then they can start guiding their reactions.
Exactly.
What you're saying is the same technique.
Exactly.
Are you angry? Are you upset? But you turn it in a different direction.
Exactly, because hope is an emotion, right?
Exactly.
You know,
Hope is a good
we
emotion.
should work for that, yeah.
Yeah, no, and I think this is really interesting and very clever. When you spoke, one technical point, when you spoke of the Tomorrow Club, is that an international organization or is that localized?
So that's a project of PEN International in collaboration with Norwegian PEN. We are setting up a digital platform for it
Right.
with some activities like mentorship and other sorts of convening to come alongside it. And interestingly, it's a 100-year-old idea. Our founder of PEN International, before she founded PEN, she set up Tomorrow Club as a tea party, sort of, to get younger writers meeting with older ones, recognizing that they don't get the same opportunities that older peers do.
Right.
So we are kind of rekindling that idea in a way, just to remember that young people need a lot more help, whether they're in trouble or not. They need to believe that their voice matters. And so I think we can create this by properly supporting them, bringing them together, translating them, and maybe that younger voice can speak more to a younger crowd who's now feeling that anxiety, that I don't know what to do, I feel alone. Well, here's a global community for you. Come join us.
This is great. What you're saying reminds me of what Kristen is doing at Wexpo with these massive young people's programs, putting through so many people every time who are learning in their youth to understand this kind of principle, the fact that they can help each other, the fact that they can hurt with each other, and find community in that. Because I think so often the fundamental impetus for some of the pain that we're seeing is loneliness. And if you give somebody something to feel they belong to, they might go that direction.
That's it.
You're giving them something good to belong to.
We are.
Just as the Wexpo program does, giving people things to cling to that are good. Yeah? Does that make sense, Felicia, with your work?
Absolutely. Can I just say I was part of this Vexpo. I went to the conference. I was part of the program, and it was really so inspiring because at first, you know, like you come there as a person, regular person, and you're like kind of feeling hopeless, kind of looking at the world, looking on social media, news, and everything is just weighing so heavy on the shoulders. And then you go to Vexpo, or you get together with like like-minded people, and it felt so hopeful. I went home and I was like, yes, we're doing this. I had talks with my colleagues. I had talks with friends from Wexpo. With so many people, I talked about it, and this really created a force. So I think just great thanks to Chris.
That's fantastic. We're down to just a few minutes. Yes, more applause. I agree. We're down to just a few minutes, but if there's someone here in the house who would like to ask something of our panelists, we'd be happy to hear a question. And then we will need to break away for the next thing coming in. But I do think this is a very interesting and energizing conversation. Everything from what Anke is doing at such a level and at such reach, and everything that you've been looking at, Jean, is fascinating, because you're getting the understanding of where these things lead eventually, and how insidious these pressures on publishing become. I was looking for another word there, but I think pressure is probably it, because especially governmental, state moving around you gets very subtle.
Well, yes, and also what we're seeing is that the state has different options,
Yes.
either to protect or to destroy.
Right.
And also what you were saying is that democracy depends on writing too, not only reading, and that is great. Thank you so much.
That's right. Do we have time for a question, and did we have one? Maybe everybody's satisfied, yeah? Good. I think this has been a very fine conversation. I want to thank you all. It's great of you to give us your time and your insights. Thank you for bringing this together, James and Kristen and all of you. And for the program here, Frankfurt Calling, this is exactly the kind of thing we're hoping it will be, where we get to discuss these things, talk about them, and each of us takes some idea away. I've heard a couple of things I hadn't thought of today, and this is helpful. So thank you all for being with us. It's great of you to come. Thank you again to our panel, and I hope the rest of your Frankfurt is fantastic.